Speaking for alternative measure number 65A is Mr. Andy Taggart.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Kendra James, for helping to coordinate, Lee, for your hospitality this evening, to the Department of Archives and History for these extraordinary museums. We're all grateful to the taxpayers of the state of Mississippi, to Katie Blunt and her team for hosting us. And all of you all, the Secretary is right, you didn't have to be here. We were masked, so it's not necessarily even all that fun to be here, but this is important. You know, sometimes we do things that our heart's not really in, right? We made a promise to a friend and we felt like we had a duty to fulfill the promise, but we didn't really feel it. Or we're a member of a volunteer organization that requires that we post a certain number of volunteer hours, so we got to go book our time, but we're just not really into it. Or maybe it's our job, or we promised to make a lot of money, and so we'll go punch the time clock, but it's not because of anything that we're passionate about. That's not what this is about for me. I care profoundly about what we're here about tonight, and nobody is paying me to be here. Let me tell you a few other things that this is not about. One, this is not about a fight between physicians and politicians, as the pro-65 crowd would have you say. If you're going to vote yes, or if you're going to vote no on question 1, vote for 65A, the alternative, because this is not a fight between physicians and politicians. This is a question of whether we will choose unelected bureaucrats to hand out permits to a $14 billion industry on the one hand, as 65 would provide, or as 65A would provide, entrust our elected officials to do their jobs, which is to craft our laws and, if necessary, to change our laws in a way to set public policy as we do in every other area of our lives. One reason that we know that 65 is not about a choice between physicians and politicians is 65 doesn't even provide for prescriptions. Punched at the beginning of the year and you're good for 365 days. What doctor has ever treated you for any condition in which he has said, go take this medicine and come see me next year? That is not how medical care works. This is not a fight between physicians and politicians. The question is really instead, will marijuana be available and accessible in the state of Mississippi? And by the way, I'm not making that up. That's the first sentence of Initiative 65. There was a time I didn't have to put on glasses to read it. The purpose of this article is to ensure the availability of and safe access to medical marijuana for qualified persons with debilitating medical conditions. What 65 is about, you all, is the availability and access to marijuana. Pure and simple. Not a fight between physicians and politicians. Something else this is not about. This is not about a limited list of 22 debilitating conditions as the only basis for which someone could get marijuana. There's a catch-all in Initiative 65 that provides that basically if a doctor thinks you have a condition kind of like the 22, then the doctor who thinks that marijuana may help you can give you your card. You punch your card at the beginning of the year, you're good for 365 days. If I thought this was only a question about 22 legitimately debilitating conditions, any person of any kind of sympathy at all would try to find a way to address that. But that is not what this is about. What this is about really is a catch-all that makes it virtually limitless. Let's think about chronic pain, which, by the way, again, if you're not sympathetic about someone with chronic pain, then go find a heart. We all are. But chronic pain under Initiative 65 doesn't have to be physical pain. Anybody ever suffered a heartbreak? That's sure enough real pain. Now, it's acute if your heartbreak was when you were 15 years old and you broke up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend. It's chronic if you lose an intimate loved one, or if your marriage falls apart. Make no mistake, that pain is real, but I don't think I'm entitled constitutionally to marijuana because my heart was broken. Do you? If you wake up in the middle of the night wondering, how am I going to make payroll this month if you're a business owner, or if you're an employee, how am I going to pay the mortgage this month, and night after night you wake up with that fist in your stomach, that is painful and that is chronic. But does that mean you have a constitutional right to marijuana? Not in my mind. So this is not a question of Are there 22 limited debilitating conditions for which someone might get medical marijuana in Mississippi if Initiative 65 is passed? It's basically Katie bar the door for marijuana, because remember, Initiative 65 is about accessibility and availability of marijuana in Mississippi. Another thing this is not about is, this is not about a question of either adopt Initiative 65 or there's no hope ever in changing marijuana laws in the state of Mississippi. That's just wrong, you all. Our legislature does respond to public pressure. If you spent any time in the Museum of Mississippi History next door, you know that our legislature responds to public pressure, because the current featured exhibit is on prohibition of alcohol, which we fought to maintain prohibition of alcohol until somebody busted the Country Club of Jackson, and lo and behold, the legislature changed the law and lifted prohibition of alcohol. The legislature does respond to public pressure. A year ago, how many of us in this room would have thought there was a chance in the world of the legislature retiring our old state flag? I wouldn't have thought that. And yet that's exactly what they did 4 months ago. Why? Because they respond to public pressure. Don't buy into the notion that you have to vote for Initiative 65 or there's no hope that we'll ever change marijuana laws in our state. There's a final thing that this is not about. This is not about choosing whether we will show our sympathy and support of parents who legitimately have incredibly challenging conditions that their children suffer from. Not a one of us was not moved by Ms. Calhoun's comments earlier this evening. And if you weren't, go find a heart. But this is not really about that, because all of us agree that we must find ways to treat conditions such as that. And if the 4 currently legal cannabis-based medicines that are available for prescription in our state are not adequate to address those concerns, then by George, let's change the law and the regulations to find what will help address those concerns. But Initiative 65 is not the way to do it. And if you believe that marijuana simply must be a part of it, then choose Initiative 65A and entrust our elected officials to do their jobs. Remember, this is not about a fight between physicians and politicians. This is a question about availability and accessibility of marijuana in the state of Mississippi. Here's what this really is about in my mind. It's, will we be clear-eyed, you all? Will we be clear-eyed, not in, will I answer a single question and put my name on a petition, hey, are you in favor of marijuana for people with debilitating conditions? Lots of people would sign that. They didn't read the 7 pages that Initiative 65 actually represents. And you won't see it on your ballot either. The question is, will we be clear-eyed about deciding, am I more interested in acting on sympathy or out of anger, or in the long-term interest of what I believe is best for the people of the state of Mississippi and for our quality of life? Does any of us really want to unleash the Trojan horse among us? Ironclad because protected by our Constitution? Sure and certain that the belly of that horse will open up just as it did during the Trojan War, and the teeming millions will come out of a $14 billion industry and open the door for recreational marijuana? I don't want to see that happen, but here's why I know that's going to happen. If we allow that Trojan horse in the state without at least the oversight of our elected officials, we're going to see things happen like is currently embedded in Initiative 65. If you're a caregiver, such as our first speaker this evening would be for her child, if you're a caregiver, Initiative 65 prohibits you from partaking of marijuana while your child or the patient is partaking. But there is no prohibition, you all, in Initiative 65 against workers in the industry partaking of medical marijuana while they're growing it, or cultivating it, or processing it, or extracting from it, or selling it to your kids, who then would have a constitutional right if they got their 1-year card punched. I'm voting no on the first question, but I'm voting for 65A because I still trust the process of our elected officials doing their jobs, and if we're going to start our way down such a dangerous path, I don't want unelected bureaucrats making those decisions for us.